Hi, and welcome to the VOILA Method podcast, Solutions for the Mind, Body, and Soul with Joel Crandall, the creator and developer of the VOILA Method. The VOILA Method bridges the gap between the complex, making it simple, using an assessment and a treatment protocol that aligns the mind, the body, and the spirit. VOILA Method is more than a technique, it's a lifestyle to help you as a practitioner and your clients. And today's guest is Jeremiah Jorgensen out of Lincoln, Nebraska, and he's the owner of the Center for Spine and Sport Rehab. Thank you for joining me, Jeremiah.
It's a pleasure, Joel. Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Doing great. The weather's warming up a bit, so it's no longer a frozen tundra.
Yeah, I saw the accidents that you guys have had there. It's been pretty crazy. So I want to jump into talking about the VOILA method here, and I want to talk to you about how it's helped you and maybe changed you personally.
Absolutely. Starting on this journey, I can honestly share and have told people before, I had no idea of how much change was possible. The biggest change that I've noticed in me is it happened a little over a year ago, was being able to find peace and know what that felt like. So even talking about that now is a really cool experience because we had done some work before that, and I can relate to some degree on the level of change because I'm fortunate enough, Carrie has also taken VOILA, and so I've seen the changes in her. But up to that point, for me, majority of all the changes were still physical. And from that point forward, once we were able to get into some of the emotional things, and peace for me was able to be embraced, and I knew what that felt like. Everybody that's been around me since then has noticed that my ability to slow my brain down, be able to have a conversation, be more present when I'm with patients instead of running a million miles an hour, in that regard has changed me immensely. So beyond that side of it, the way we look at treat patients in our clinic now is truly seeing them as a whole person. Previously as a physical therapist, and 14, our identity as to who and what we were. So traditionally as PTs, we see people as parts. They come in, we fix their parts. Well, now after taking VOILA, even after level 1, you start to get an understanding that somebody's knee pain may not be coming from their knee. So having a better understanding when a patient comes in with listening to where they may truly be having dysfunction from was huge. So I think it comes in multiple avenues. The big ones obviously are to change how we think as a PT, but then also finding peace has been absolutely huge in every aspect of my life.
And what's really amazing about that, I want to follow up with that finding peace. A lot of people think they know what peace is, and it's a destination, but they don't truly know what peace feels like until you feel peace, right? And it was beautiful to watch that session with you and seeing your transition into that peace. So now when I said peace to you, you're like, I know what that feels like. Because otherwise it's just a word.
It truly was.
Yeah.
And you go to a mental state of thinking, well, people, well, I can assure you that's not even in the same ballpark by any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I meditate, so I'm at peace. No, you're not. The other thing I want to follow up with is that you mentioned, obviously, your wife and the smart one and the handsome one in the group here. You actually sent her to the seminar prior to you coming because you were studying a different modality. So talk a little bit about why you sent her.
I knew at that point that I had taken, it was about a 6-month course that looks at the neurological system. It doesn't really matter at this point, but I knew that if I took VOILA, because you and I had interaction over Messenger, Facebook for several months, probably 3 months roughly before Carrie even took her class. Didn't even interact with Carrie. I didn't even tell Carrie what class was about. Even at that point, with the conversations you and I had had, I still truly had no clue of what Voila really entailed,
Mm-hmm.
which was fine.
But that's one of the things, why the reasons we're doing these podcasts is so people can get an understanding that this is much more than just a technique, right? There's much more deeper stuff going on than just a technique. So it's difficult to explain until you find peace. You know what peace feels like. So you don't understand the seminar until you take the seminar. So that's kind of the funny thing about this.
Yeah. So I buy the ticket, pay for class, send Carrie to class in Scottsdale. She shows up to class. I didn't hear it. She sends me a message the morning, thanks. So I'll head to class. I'll chat with you at lunch break. I'm waiting and waiting. Comes time for lunch. She sends me a message and goes, do you have any clue what the hell course you actually sent me to? I said, well, it's Voila, and it should be some form of muscle testing. What's been your experience? She goes, yeah. She goes, I had no idea. And from then on, at the end of the day, she called me and actually thanked me and said, I wouldn't have signed up for this course on my own, but after being here just from day one, she said, I can already tell you, I look at things completely different. She said, I can't wait to test you with some things as soon as I get back. And completely blew her mind.
Nice. And so let's jump into that story, because I believe you used your modality and did an assessment, and then Carrie came back home and waited, I think, 90 minutes for you to finish your assessment, and then she did the Voila assessment. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so to that light, because everybody's been picking up on, no matter what modality they want to use, that it's the latest and greatest, which was fine. So as a result of that, with the amount of time that she knew that I had spent studying the other for over 6 months and using it in the clinic, we were fortunate enough that a colleague of ours came to shadow us in the clinic. She was open to the fact of us testing her with whatever we wanted to use. And as you said, it took me 90 minutes. I went head to toe trying to find everything that I knew within that current state of what I understood to find where dysfunction was at. And a couple times Carrie looked at me and said, so are you guys about done, or what's going on here? I said, well, we got some more to test. Sorry. We get done with all of it. She goes through, and no joke, within 10 minutes, found the dysfunction. Some of them overlapped, but treated them. And when I went back, other than 2 specific issues that set outside of level 1 class, which now knowing what we do in Voila would have taken care of all of it, she treated all of it in 10 minutes.
So she did the assessment and treatment in 10 minutes.
Yes.
A little bit more efficient than a 90-minute assessment, huh?
Absolutely.
And that's the other thing I want to talk about with the Voila assessment, which I think what makes it so special is it's constantly running. You're always doing the assessment. It's not like, okay, Jeremiah, you come in, I'm going to run my assessment. Okay, now I'm going to run my treatment. But yet I never go back and do an assessment again. It makes no sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I was actually talking with an AK chiropractor. He said the same thing. He's like, yeah, my assessment used to take me 90 minutes. He just took level 1 in December. In 9 seconds, he finished the assessment.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. He's doing really well. Now, I've had a wonderful opportunity of helping you, I guess we'll say, at your clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with the people, because sometimes people don't believe the stories, but now I have you face to face so you can tell the story of Travis, the stroke patient.
Absolutely. So we were fortunate enough. We started now seeing Travis almost 3 years ago. At that time, because he's the same age I am, he was 37 years old. Had a massive stroke. They had told his family they'd be lucky if he ever walked again, ever get out of a wheelchair, or ever speak again. with any cognitive ability behind that. He was at two very well-known rehab facilities in the Midwest. At the time we finally evaluated him, and I don't even know how he ended up at our clinic, to be honest. His family just looked around him because of the name, said we're not giving up on him yet. So he shows up at that point, sliding his right leg, using a cane, and unable to speak other than typically saying hi and his name.
And didn't he have some sort of, and tell the people what this is, some sort of a electronic box on his leg to?
Yeah, so that was progression. So initially when he came in, he had an AFO, which is an ankle foot orthosis, big plastic brace that goes on the leg that traditionally for people with a stroke, that's what they use to control their foot. Otherwise it turns in and they can't walk and they would injure their foot. Well, throughout therapy, he has progressed and now actually has what's called a walk aid, which is a fancy neurostimulator to get his foot to do a similar activity. So fast forward to when you were able to help him in the clinic, he continued to have issues with walking, was continuing to have issues with driving. We were able to work on him. He is now independent with driving, that they told him before would never happen again, lives on his own independently, and turns the walk aid device down enough that drives his mom nuts because they spent $5,000 on the device, that he barely feels it because after we treated him with VOILA protocol, has better feedback and doesn't like the sensation of that thing zapping his foot when he needs to swing his leg through with gait.
I remember, I'll probably never forget that session with Travis. But I remember when I asked him to turn off that device, and the mother just gave me a look.
Yep.
And I said, walk for me, Travis, without the device. And he looked, it was a very almost normal gait.
Yes.
And the mom just looked at me and said, are you kidding me? I'm like, yeah. We were just trying it. We didn't know what was going to happen. You know? So yeah, that Travis story, and even his cognitive skill, even seeing it change during the session, where I was able to understand what he was talking about and saying, and found out he was a huge Cubs fan. Yeah. The other one that
also,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Also, and that's why I think we're lucky to have VOILA as a treatment and assessment tool to share in his story. Traditionally in the physical therapy world, we think, well, in 2 years somebody's done after a major stroke and this is the best they're going to be. He was the head of IT at a very well-known place in Chicago, and when that would happen, he was literally on the computer with 3 different monitors using a cell phone. So this guy's ability to multitask and deal in the computer world with coding and everything else was through the roof prior to all of this happening. I can assure you some of that started to kick in and you could see his brain processing as soon as you were in the clinic that day and began working with him, because there was a point that his entire face and mood changed and you could see a little bit. And his mom has said that since, when we work on him, that she'll see glimpses of the old Travis coming back as far as how he would process and how he would act. And for us, and I tell his mom every day they come in, it's a gift just to be in that place. But I can assure you, without having VOILA to help him through that from a neurological status, those patients plateau out very quickly. And that's where in the physical therapy world, as well as even what Julieza will tell you, Wenzel from Florida, it's a complete game changer if you want to use it in the physical therapy world.
Brilliant. And what's really nice, because I get to talk with you and stuff, is, but we keep seeing Travis's progression going up. I mean, to the fact of now he's driving on his own, living on his own. I think he took a flight for his birthday on his own, which doctor said he would never do.
He drove from Lincoln to Chicago by himself.
Wow.
8-hour drive that he used to have to ride in the car even a year ago with his parents to go, and they would have to stop at least 2 times because it would wear him out. He drove on his own this past year for his birthday to Chicago.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, it just blows my mind all the time. And We have another special client of yours that we'd like to talk about, Erin, and she has something that I can't pronounce. So go ahead.
Sure. So Erin is an amazing person because she lives in her world where she has the ability to use her photographic memory with everything that she looks at to navigate her world. Her formal diagnosis of what she has is called periventricular leukomalacia. When somebody has that diagnosis, they end up functioning similar to someone that has significant cerebral palsy.
Mhm.
So they have extreme weakness and tone on over one half of their body. And as a result of that, her vision, head, neck control, and then even deformity in her feet is what she's
Yeah.
stuck with because it kicks in at an age around 2 or 3 that they can no longer stand or walk.
And she couldn't stand on her or sit on her own in her wheelchair, right? She had to be strapped into her chair to keep her upright.
Correct. Or with any transfer, so they'll transfer out of the chair to help put her clothes on to do ADLs. You literally had to hang on to her. She was Humpty Dumpty. She was not going to be staying where you put her.
The one thing I remember about that session, because I had no idea, I had just met her, and like I said, I can't pronounce that long name that you just said. And I was working on her and she was sitting up on her own, and you just looked at me, shaking your head. I'm like, what? What? So explain that.
So in the past, anytime you'd work with her and you had to have at least one hand on her and then even give her arm support so she could grab onto you, or she was not going to tolerate any position you were in. Some of it was discomfort, but just all the tone that kicks in. We're able in that position of treatment to get to where we were as a result of working on her feet. The really cool part of that story, we transfer her. Her mother is there in the treatment room, has been adamant, the mom's been a nurse for 30 some years, that nobody can touch Erin's feet but her or do if and she knows. Well, to the backside of this story, keep in mind she's got shoes on, socks on, heavy braces on her legs. Joel starts to slip the shoe off, the sock off, the brace to take a look at her feet, and the mom grabs me and goes, "What is he doing? Can't do that." Touches Erin's feet. She has no problem with it. A little bit discomfort, but nothing significant. And afterwards goes, "Can we go home and can you massage my feet? That feels awesome. I don't know what he just did, but that feels amazing."
And no one could touch her feet before because they were just hypersensitive, weren't they?
Absolutely. Beyond hypersensitive.
Yeah.
To the point that if you would work with them to even stretch them for range of motion to help her out, she would get pain all the way up into her legs and she would be miserable the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah. Well, that's again another session I'll never forget, especially when she was sitting up next to you and not touching you.
It was awesome.
And that was, well, your sessions are 45 minutes, so that's the amount of time that we had, and we were able to do that in 45 minutes. And again, that's why I wanted to do these podcasts, because you can write a few sentences about this, but no one understands, no one really believes it. And I mean, this method is so above myself and anyone else that does it. There's so much happening on a quantum level, but to see these results is just amazing. It's just amazing. I get choked up just even thinking about it because I don't know. It's just amazing. But do you use Voila as a standalone method? Or do you kind of synergistically you meld it into some other modalities that you use?
I use it with everything else that we do in physical therapy, but I can tell you that now, when it's used and everything else is applied through the concepts of the Voila method, it's doing probably 90% of the work behind the scenes to help us be more efficient. So we use functional dry needling in our office.
Mm-hmm.
We use laser. Carrie and I both have extensive background in manual therapy, so from virtually any type of adjustment through the spine we can do in the manual therapy world. We will use the VOILA method to help us hone in on where do we need to needle, what should we adjust, what position should they be in, how do they need to be adjusted, will they tolerate adjustment? And the cool part is when you start processing and assessing and treating a patient in that fashion, it's more efficient. Almost all of them will tell you afterwards there's little or no pain or discomfort. With especially in the dry needling world, most of the time people have a little bit of discomfort. You use it on top of that, it's a game changer as well. So we also use it on our athletes. We'll have collegiate track and field patients come in. As a result of that, they'll say, you know what, the last one I remember, she was having problems with shot and disc, working on the spin, but she had hurt her back, and as a result couldn't get through the end of her rotation. Was able to have her go through her routine.
Was this the concussion lady we worked on?
Yes. She had that with it, and then as a result, yes, added that into it. So without giving out any details, was able to watch her in her full, without a shot or disc, go through her full routine, assess when she's doing it, and said, okay, here's the actual position we need to be in, test it, treat it. She had been a miserable amount of practice for 2 weeks. The first time I treated her, she had a meet that weekend 2 days later, was completely fine and competed, and I think she was top 3 in the meet.
Wow. And I believe that's the young lady that had the concussion, and we did a VEP to show before and after VOILA.
Yes.
And we've posted that before. We'll post it again after this. But can you explain the difference in the VEP before and after with her, and what VPE is?
Sure. So, and I'm glad you brought it up because I wanted to give credit to it. So we're fortunate enough in Lincoln, Nebraska, that one of the top optometrists that specializes in neurooptometry, which is everything to do with the brain, not just the eyes, lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. As a result of that, everybody is always asking, where's the research? VOILA is doing whatever, it's energy work. How do you know it's real? So we were lucky enough to take this same patient, set them up with a VEP, which, to make it simple, is a brain test where you put 3 electrodes on the head, and what you're getting feedback on is how do the brain and eyes work with whatever they're focusing on. The importance of that is completely different than doing normal optometry testing. The VEP was done originally on this patient, and she was half of where she should be. So a 18 to 20-year-old athlete on a VEP score should be 18 to 20 for total. That's their benchmark.
Okay.
She was at 7.
Wow.
The reason for that importance is after a concussion for where she needed to be, she was under half of her capacity for her brain to process what was needed for her to be back being an athlete. Yeah, she's fine if she's walking around, but not as an athlete.
Yeah, big difference.
So they do their testing with VEP, get the result. Joel does his work. At this point, Joel is actually testing her. You're in California. She's sitting here in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Let that sink in for everybody. Assess and treat her. They rerun the VEP. At that point, she was back to a 16. She still needed corrective prism. Dr. Nedra walks out of the room and grabs me and goes, "What in the hell did you just do? I have never seen that happen before." He goes, "You didn't touch her. Carrie did. She had something on her foot we had to treat. Mm-hmm. One small correction." And Dr. Nedra goes, "I'm blown away. You need to figure out what you just did, because you don't just change a VEP by touching somebody's foot, because that traditionally has nothing to do with what's going on with visual pathway, but it does."
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think brought Dr. Nedro in, and had the very fortunate pleasure of meeting him and working with him. we can talk all day. So this podcast is going to be a lot longer than the other ones because we got to talk about Dr.
That's
Nedro.
okay.
Um, so I meet Dr. Nedro, and he's like, "Well, explain to me what you do." I go, "Well, instead of explaining what I do, let me show you what I do."
Mm-hmm.
And he's a golfer. I'm like, "Oh, cool. Let me see your golf swing." And he brings his arms up and he can barely move. I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, let's make a correction to this." And we make the correction. He comes back out and he's like, "Well, where's a club? Where's a stick?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't really have one, but let me see your golf swing." And it was the smoothest, most beautiful golf swing I've ever seen. Made Tiger Woods look sick. And he looked at me and he goes, "You're kidding me." I'm like, "No." He goes, he goes, "I got to leave. I got to go hit some golf balls." But before he left, he said, "You and we need to sit in a room and we will hammer something out." And most people, they it's lip service, like they tell you that, but they don't really do it. That's not the case here. He literally made it happen. We were in a room. But tell the story about us three being in a room working on somebody after the VOILA level 1 in Nebraska with the guy that had no depth perception.
I'll keep that one simple because his diagnosis was pretty intense. So Dr. Nedro was able to use the prismatic therapy, which when you've had enough of a brain injury, it's one of the gold standards to allow somebody to have better visual processing. The limitation you have in that prism world is if somebody has enough of a brain injury, the body will only tolerate a certain amount of prism before now the correction you want to do can't occur because they have to have too strong of a prism. Dr. Nedro was at the limit of the capacity of the prism that he could use when Joel walked in and he goes, "Why don't you take a look at it and see what you can do? Is there anything you can do?" At that point, I think he was thinking more concerned on the vocal component that this man needed to have so care providers could relate with him better. You ended up assessing him, treating him with something related to sternum. And as a result of that, Dr. Nedro went back, retested with what we have now integrated through VOILA, and was able to reduce the amount of prism he was going to use on this gentleman by half.
Yeah, by half.
And to some, that's not going to seem like much, but once again, Dr. Nedro goes, "I cannot believe that just happened because that would have taken months from where he was at, and you just dropped it in half, and now you've made my life easy because the correction set of prism now at 4 diopter is something that we can work with and is going to be much more tolerated for him with him leaving my office than what he would have been in."
And before that, diopter would have been about that thick, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then
would
we
have
cut
been
it.
9 diopter.
Yeah. And we cut it down. We just walked into that session. We were going in to say goodbye to Dr. Nedro and thank him for helping us through the weekend. We got thrown into that. That was pretty amazing. But let's talk about the one with the depth perception issue with the right eye, where the guy was scoring 0.
Absolutely. So it's another fun story. So we were using software called Visual Edge. Major League Baseball and every level of baseball through minor league uses Visual Edge as a screening, but also a tool with the scouts to help determine what they feel is a better player because of depth perception. Eye acuity is probably the best way to put it from their words. We had an attendee and we assessed him with depth perception with their protocol, and the best he could get after running it 5 times, and a few of them were 0, was 25%.
What did the company tell you if someone ever scored a 0 to 25%?
I called them after that on the Monday and I asked them if they were aware of the fact, or was it normal that somebody would go from 25% to 100%. We did the assessment and treatment and he hit 100%. Their response was, "We've never had that happen. Traditionally, if somebody's at 25%, The best we've ever seen is 75, but normally those people hit 50%. And that's with ongoing exercises with our software to keep them in that place. Otherwise, they're going to drift back to where they were.
And how long did that take
So
us?
the owner, I was speaking to the owner of the company, he was blown away and said, what the heck did you do that this gentleman went from 25% to 100%?
Yeah. And how long did that take us, Jeremiah?
Maybe 5 minutes
About 5 minutes, didn't it? Yeah. And
total, maybe total.
yeah, and I've talked to him since. He has not reverted back at all. He doesn't wear glasses, and that's what Dr. Nedro was blown away about. Was he goes, well, he's supposed to be wearing glasses. You'll never get him to 100%, and we did it anyway.
Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, so that's the other piece. So this person also has astigmatism, which in the optometry world, they will tell you if somebody has enough of an astigmatism that they should be wearing glasses and don't, and then have a depth perception of 25%. Agreed. Dr. Nedro sat there and he looked at me and goes, you're not going to get him to 100%. He's got enough depth perception. He goes, Joel's working on him, but he goes, I'll guarantee he won't get perfect score.
Yeah, I think that's what sealed it for putting us in a room together. Because he was jumping up and down like a little kid. He couldn't believe it either.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe it either. But the reason we're telling these stories and sharing this with you is we have the science, and we can continue to work on getting these development through these programs that Major League Baseball players are using, and different, and VEP, which is very few people, neurooptometrists, are using. We are using these to get our results, and look, we're showing you this is what we can do. So it's just not lip service we're providing for you. So we are doing the research, and we're still compiling research. So I want to thank you, Jeremiah, because you are the leading edge of this research for this. But also, let's talk a quick bit about, and we're not being quick at all on this podcast, but that's okay, I think, because you were the one that came to me and said, what about the eyes? I'm like, well, what about them? And then we meet Dr. Nedro. So I want to thank you, first of all, for doing the research that we've been doing with VOILA and using these programs, because it's definitive. You can't cheat these programs. Mm-hmm. And secondly, for coming to me with the eye. And so some of you that may not know this, Jeremiah came to me with the eyes, and Jeremiah just did a talk at NORA, which is NORA stands for Neuro-Optomic Rehab Association.
Yep.
So Jeremiah spoke there last year, and he's also a big part of developing the level 3 part for the eye. So when people tell you, or other modalities tell you they know a lot about the eyes, well, if you want to see a 77-year-old man drop to the floor laughing at you, tell him you know a lot about the eyes, right?
Correct.
Now, we just taught a seminar last year about the eyes, and we just still scratched the surface with that seminar. Mm-hmm. I don't know where my question was going here, but I just want to thank you, for setting all that up.
I can fill you in. So, yeah, so the cool part about where things went was I had time to chat with Dr. Nedro after you left, and his concerns were, well, how do we bridge what you guys are doing into what we do? And the conversation from that led, because obviously we aren't going to have $100,000 to $200,000 of optometry examination equipment in a physical therapy clinic, nor is it appropriate because we can't diagnose. Mm-hmm. So the conversation came down to ask Dr. Nedro, if all of this equipment was gone, what are the things that you would do that you would know, short of a VEP, that you have someone set up with what you do as close as you can? And the light bulb went on. He goes, that's simple. There's like 4 things. He goes, that's all you want to know? It's like, well, there is, but the challenge behind it is traditionally when people are testing the eyes, with shining light into the eye, or thinking that they're testing something as a reflex after that, you've already lost the race and you're well beyond a day behind.
You're a week and a half behind.
Correct.
Let me explain
Yes.
why I say a week and a half behind, Jeremiah. Let's just do some simple math. Speed of light is 186,000 meters per second, or miles per second, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the circumference of the Earth, take it around the equator, in 1 second, light has gone around the equator 7.5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a week later.
Mm-hmm.
Just let that sink in, huh? There's some math for you. They think if they're shining a light in the eye, they're instantly going to get some result afterward. No, not at all. And this is why eye exercises do not work. Mm-hmm. They do not work.
The upper level in the optometry world will tell you that same stance, that they make a ton of money from it, but as soon as you stop doing the exercises, the compensation pattern that was there that existed will resume itself because you didn't treat the source of the problem. You allowed the person a better ability to compensate or strengthen so they can cope, but you're not treating dysfunction.
Correct. And that's what's happening in the body working world too. They're creating a hack or whatever for the system to be able to move physically, but they haven't gone to the source cause of what was causing the lack of equilibrium. So as soon as the client goes home, they're all out of balance again. And then they come back the next week with the same problem. And with VOILA, clients don't come back in the next week with the same problem. They come back in for something totally different. Mm-hmm. If I even see them the following week. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So obviously we're talking about how VOILA is a bit different than other modalities. What would you say to somebody, we're going to wrap this up here, what would you say to somebody that was thinking about taking the VOILA method seminar?
Kind of like at the beginning, the biggest thing for me has been the self-transformation. The other modalities, anything else we've done, even dry needling, they'll tell you, you know what, you probably shouldn't be needling yourself. The other course I was taking prior to that, really hard with the way they assess for you to really treat or test yourself. It's been one of the few things after being a PT for 15 years that you have control, and I mean that in a good way, to be able to assess yourself, see what's going on, and take that responsibility to treat yourself. And as a result of that, with the growth you have, and we've even paid for it for our own employees to attend VOILA and have told every one of them, even if you never use this in the clinic, if you use it for the tool for yourself, for the growth and clarity you will have, you could go back the next day, even if you want to do massage, any other body work, a PT, a chiro, personal trainer, whatever you want to do, and you're still going to be in a better place than what you were without it, even if you don't think that you want to use it on your clients. So to me, the beautiful part is the self-growth that you will have and the changes that you have. If that's something you're looking for, then absolutely take the course. But if you're in a place where you're not willing to do the work and look in the mirror to change yourself, then there may be a little bit of an awakening when that happens.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of the discomforts that some people don't care for too much because they're actually afraid of their own growth. Mm-hmm. But we have a seminar coming up in Lincoln, Nebraska, April 15th and 16th, mm-hmm. So tax day. So that'll be coming up. So get signed up for that. Go to voilamethod.com and you can sign up for the course. Jeremiah will be doing some of the teaching this time. So he's getting ready for his teacher training program. So that's very exciting as well.
Thank you.
So I look forward to seeing everybody in Lincoln, Nebraska, the heart of the heartland, on April 14th and 15th, or 15th and 16th. Jeremiah, thank you so much for your time. We could have gone on for hours with this. Hopefully everybody will just listen to this for the 45 minutes we got here. And really appreciate your time. And we're going to have to do this again to get into some more detail, some other stuff.
Be happy to do that, Joel.
Is there a good way for people to find you on social media?
Social media, we're on Facebook, Center for Spine and Sport Rehab. Otherwise, online, it's ptlincoln.com.
ptlincoln.com?
Yep. It's our
Perfect.
website. It's the easiest way to find us.
Excellent. Well, Jeremiah, keep up the great work. Big hug to Carrie for me. We'll get her on here to do a podcast shortly.
That should be fun. Good luck.
Yeah, she's got a busy schedule with 3 young boys. But maybe one of the later podcasts we'll do is how your boys are using
Yes.
the Voila method. We'll save that for another time. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Jeremiah.
Appreciate it, Joel. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.